What's going on, and welcome to the NBA DFS Q&A. My name is Tom Vecchio. I'm one of the writers and analysts at numberfire.com. I'm the host of the Daily ISO, the podcast we have for NBA DFS 5 days a week right here on Number Fire. You can follow me on Twitter at DFS_Tom. I'm here for the next 30 minutes to answer some of your questions about tonight's 11-game NBA slate starting at 7 o'clock. Of course, the NBA tipped off last night with only 2 games, but this is the first real slate of NBA DFS. Great options across the board. Still waiting on a bit of injury information. Of course, injuries are massive in NBA DFS. We have some really solid games to target in terms of their over-unders, what their projections should be. So if you have any questions, let me know. Kind of recap things as I did in the Daily ISO this morning, if we don't have anything. But Alvin is asking favorite studs to build around and how many you're trying to fit into one lineup. Always trying to fit as many studs into lineups as possible. I only play tournaments, so do not play cash games. So going with a stars and scrubs build is something that I generally like to do. I think that starting off with Joel Embiid and Damian Lillard is a really, really strong option tonight. Obviously, it brings down your average remaining per player to 5,500. But we know that Joel Embiid can eat in really any matchup. Going up against the Pelicans, not really worried about that. Obviously, no Ben Simmons. We should see more offensive usage flowing towards Embiid. And then Lillard, a player that has a 45-point floor and a seemingly 70-point ceiling on some nights, going up against Sacramento. And we just look at this game environment overall with a 234-point over-under. It's got a 6.5-point spread. We'd like to see that a little bit closer. But in reality, we've seen Portland just be so bad, defensively over the past few seasons. And it's not like Sacramento's a good defensive team either way. So Embiid and Lillard is really where I'm starting off. And then it comes down to, can we roster Jason Tatum? And this would be partly due to, what we could be waiting on would be the Jaylen Brown news, because earlier in the day, he said he was in the lineup, and then he said he's still questionable because he's coming out of the COVID protocols. So we're waiting on that information. If Jaylen Brown is in fact ruled out, I mean, these 3 players are where I absolutely love to start. There's obviously plenty of value out there on an 11-game slate, but we're looking at like a 45-point floor for all of these players with 60, 70-point ceilings for a lot of them. So I am on board with these 3 as my main 3 studs on tonight's slate. This is obviously not to say I'm not going to have exposure to Jokic, who I really like for GPPs. Of course, Bradley Beal has immense scoring upside. Exactly 2 players I started with was trying to fit Fox and Beal as well. Listen, if you can find it, I think it's great. It's not like De'Aaron Fox is not in a good matchup. Going up against the Trailblazers. Again, they don't play a whole lot of defense, and they haven't for a number of seasons. And obviously his offensive usage should be there. And then Bradley Beal, a player that I have been always fond of rostering over the past few seasons, especially this year without Russell Westbrook. If we look at the Wizards starting lineup, yes, Dinwiddie is a very solid player, but he doesn't always bring that massive scoring ceiling and doesn't necessarily command a whole lot of offensive usage. If we just look at this lineup, outside of Beal and then Dinwiddie, like KCP, Kuzma, Gafford, like these aren't high volume shooters. It's really still going to be the Bradley Beal show this year, and him going for, what did he average last year? 30, 31 points per game. Like that's what should be on the table with that 3-point upside, him pushing towards 50 FanDuel points every single night. So that's a spot that I will certainly look. You are looking for if Precious Achiuwa is going to be starting tonight. That's something we have to wait on getting confirmation. If he's going to be there, I don't think he'll be in the starting lineup. Starting lineups here for the Raptors. Oh, this does have him starting because Boucher was bumped down. Listen, if he's going to be in there, obviously, I spoke about this game a little bit or a good amount on the podcast today, the Daily ISO. I love this game environment. I said the game opened up at 218. I said I like the over in that game. It's jumped up to 222. So really anyone in this matchup, I'm going to have some interest in. Obviously, there's varying degrees with Beal and Van Vliet being up at the top. I'm big on Scotty Barnes this year. He looked really good in the preseason. And the minutes should be there for him with still with Pascal Siakam out and a player that can really fill it up in all the stat categories, right? He went for like 9, 5, and 4 in the preseason for points, rebounds, and assists, like getting that value. So either Achiuwa or Barnes, I'm on board with both of them. Hopefully we'll we'll obviously get the lineups updated, but it becomes at what point do we get them? So we have the Rockets, Porter, Green, Gordon, Wood, Tice. Yeah, that's what we should be expecting from them. That Rockets Minnesota game is also another spot that I have a lot of interest, just because we should be expecting plenty of points in this matchup, a 231.5 over under. I mean, we know both teams are bad on defense. So again, that's another game I'm targeting heavily. Sacramento, Portland, Houston, Minnesota, Washington, Toronto are kind of like my 3 games. Alvin is asking, Minnesota and Rockets has a high total, but outside of Cat, you don't really know who to target. So I wrote up Malik Beasley today. I do 3 values every day right here or on numberfire.com. I do the 3 values. I'm big on Malik Beasley, a player that can always fill up the stat sheet. Yes, we do see a number of options in the Rockets offense that certainly will command the ball between Towns, D'Angelo Russell, and Anthony Edwards, hopefully taking a step forward this year. But Beasley is a player that at only $4,800 can really just fall into plenty of fantasy points due to the pace of the game and the overall game environment, right? Where a player, needing to score 30 real points is not something that we need to see from Beasley, but him going for 15, 5 and 5 is something that he can realistically do. And that's really not an amazingly impressive stat line, but he's going to be reaching or exceeding fantasy value just because the game environment is so strong with the back and forth pace. So I'm on board with a lot of these players tonight. We have confirmed starting lineup for the Rockets. So Beasley, I would go Towns, Edwards, Beasley as my top 3 actually for Minnesota. I like D'Angelo Russell. I just think that there are better options at his position at that similar salary. And then the Rockets, I really think you can roster anyone probably outside of Eric Gordon, not a player I'm super interested in rostering most nights. DJ's asking, would you take the Bulls tonight on the money line? Spread and the total are over 218. So I actually already took the Bulls on the spread. I did not take them on the money line. They are... Where the Bulls, they're going up against, where are you? -5. Money line, whatever they are. Let me just bring up the FanDuel Sportsbook real quick to see what they're on the money line right now. I already took them on the spread. I got them at 5. Nope, not MLB, NBA, -210. And that's obviously a lot of juice, or I think that's a lot of juice. 218, you said. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't lay that much straight up on the money line. That's just me personally, whatever your betting trends might be. I do think that they will win the game, but I like them at -5. I just don't like the -210. It's Mr. Jackie Moon on Twitch is saying thoughts on LaMelo. Yeah, I spoke about LaMelo earlier, or on the podcast, I should say, earlier today, $7,600. I think he looked really good last year, dealt with the injury, but, filling up the stat sheet is not something we always see from a lot of rookies. And considering this game has a 1-point spread, it's got a good over under sitting at 222.5. It's not amazingly high, but 222 with a 1-point spread, 2 teams that, had a lack of defense last year and actually played pretty fast, is a spot that I would absolutely like to look. So, trying to jam in some of these options in the mid tier, alongside some of these stars, I think is a very viable option. So I also, going back to DJ's point, so I'm fully on board with LaMelo, but outside of the Bulls, I said I like Philly tonight on the spread. I like Boston tonight on the spread. Philly, Boston, Toronto. I like all those teams. I think it's, hopefully we get a pretty calm start to the NBA. Maybe some of the other games offer some craziness, but those are the teams I really think should be winning. Took them all on the spread, not on the money line. Does Markkanen play 25 plus minutes, or will Love cut into that? That's a really good question. I can bring up Markkanen right now. We haven't projected for right at 25 minutes, a hair under 1 FanDuel point per minute, sitting at 24.1 with 25.62 minutes. I believe he's expected to be in the starting lineup. I don't know if that's actually confirmed yet. Let's give this a little refresh to see if he's actually confirmed in the starting lineup. It's not yet. I know that the Cavs are high on Evan Mobley, so that's something we have to pay attention to, what that dynamic looks like with their rotation of players, whether it be Markkanen, Mobley, and Kevin Love, what we're going to be seeing from them. But if Markkanen is going to be out there for 25 plus minutes, which is what we have him projected for, that's a spot that I would certainly look in some of the first run-throughs I did for my in the optimizer, spitting out a bunch of lineups, like Markin was in there a good amount. I do limit, obviously, the player exposure. This game, I think, is okay. 218 is okay. It's certainly not the best on the slate. It's certainly not the worst on the slate. This San Antonio Orlando game and the New York Knicks Boston Celtics game is something that I'm a little bit hesitant on having too many players from those games. That's something I talk about a lot. It's like I don't want to be overexposed to having too many players from those games in the same lineup. And often, or not often, all the time, I make sure to limit the number of players when I'm using the optimizer, limit the number of players from those games in one lineup so we don't have too much exposure. DJ is saying, do you like the Magic to upset the Spurs tonight? Probably not. The Magic are probably not going to be winning too many games tonight. The Spurs are better than the Magic. I don't know by how much, but the Magic are not a team I'm going to be targeting too often this season. I in terms of betting on them, I think they obviously have plenty of DFS options. Throwing those in a money line parlay, hopefully it ends my curse. Well, I hopefully they all hit too, because I took all those teams as well. I took Toronto, Boston. Who else? Chicago and Philly. Those are teams I took so far tonight. I also will say I took the over on Richaun Holmes, points, rebounds, assists combined. 21.5 is where I got it at. I took the over on that. I spoke about Richaun Holmes on the podcast because they announced that Marvin Bagley is not going to be in the starting lineup for the Kings. He's just going to be like out of their rotation, at least to start the season, and et cetera, et cetera. So I like Richaun Holmes in DFS. I said I took the player prop. Hit the over 21.5 points, rebounds, assists combined. Alvin is asking, would you play Embiid and Harris together? And do you like Ingram or rather than the value from New Orleans? So yes, and yes, I guess. Like I spoke about Ingram extensively. I spoke about him. I did a show on NBA TV on Monday night. I'm big on Evan Ingram, at least to start the season, right? Because there's no Zion. And until Zion comes back, if we look at this Pelicans lineup, which is further down right here, like, yeah, sure, Devontae Graham can certainly put up some shots, but, Valanciunas is going to take plenty of game. But Brandon Ingram is kind of the guy on that team. So I am all over Brandon Ingram every night until Zion comes back. Like, that's just something I want to make sure I do, because him going for 25, 7 and 4 a game is realistic. Like that's something we can certainly see. I do also like the value. I do like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I'm on board with him. Najee Marshall is going to be in the starting lineup. We need to get some confirmation on that. I think that's also fine. Garrett Temple, not necessarily a player I love rostering or have loved rostering over the few years. So to answer your question, yes, I do. I think it's fine to have Embiid and Harris in the same lineup. I also do like Ingram. As I mentioned on the podcast as well, these teams finished 9th and 10th last year when it came to offensive pace. And we have a 4-point or 4.5 point spread with a solid 224 over under. So I think it's viable to have all three of them in the same lineup. So that's certainly a viable option, really, no matter which way you spin it. Andrew Carlson's asking, I'm back and forth between Markkanen or Barnes from Toronto in DFS. I like both of them. If I had to choose one, I'm going to choose Scotty Barnes just because I think that this game environment is going to be a little bit stronger for all involved, right? Where an over-under that's 4.5, 5-ish points higher. We have a closer spread. Salaries are, let's just call them equal. I'm going to be leaning with Scotty Barnes, if I have to choose one. DJ's asking Thunder over the Jazz tonight. If you're a Thunder fan, I guess you can hope, but we saw what the Jazz did at home last season. We see how heavy favorites they are, 13.5 on the spread. What's their updated money line? Where the Jazz right here. If you want to just throw a dart, that's fine. That's not something I do. That's not something I would initially recommend. I think there are better ways to, bet this slate. The Jazz were just so dominant at home last year. That's not a spot that I'm really going to be looking, at least on the money line from a betting perspective. Dinwiddie and Sabonis or Van Vliet and Christian Wood from Sal on YouTube. That's a really good one. Dinwiddie and Sabonis or Van Vliet and Christian Wood. So I'm a big Sabonis guy. I am and I have been for a couple of years. I just think he's super, super consistent, double-double or a triple-double on a nightly basis, and he gets there seemingly sometimes at halftime. I I'm still going to go with Van Vliet and Christian Wood. These game environments are just so good. It's not saying that the other game environments aren't good as well, but Van Vliet should have a very high usage rate, and Christian Wood is a player that we have seen be able to match or stay in the same range when it comes to the production that Sabonis was putting up over the past few seasons. So I would go with Van Vliet and Christian Wood in that circumstance. Not saying I don't like Sabonis, because I know I will 100% have shares of him in my lineups tonight. Like, that's a fact. Dinwiddie, I think, is fine. Like, I know why you're going to Dinwiddie. Like, again, this game environment is good overall. Modest salary. Just in this price range, as we get into like the mid sixes, I'd almost rather see myself taking shares of Tyrese Halliburton, or even dropping down a little bit further to take some of the value here at point guard / shooting guard. Seth Curry, I think, is a solid option. And then, Tyrese Maxey, I also wrote up him today. So I just think of the cost benefit of rostering Dinwiddie over someone else, I think, is too much compared to Van Vliet and Christian Wood. So let's just give this a refresh, see if we have any starting lineups. I doubt it. It's still only 4:15. Rozier is downgraded to questionable, if that matters for some people that are expanding their player pools. Obviously, if he's going to be out of the starting lineup, I believe Miles Bridges also wasn't he downgraded or still listed as questionable? Or am I remembering something else? Whatever it might be, like, that could open up some playing time for Kelly Oubre on the wing. Miles Bridges, I knew he was dealing with this knee. Oh, he's probable now. Okay. So if Rozier's at the starting lineup, we might see Kelly Oubre in there. We might see Ish Smith on a long shot. Part of what we'll see, early in the season is, and I'll talk about it on the podcast as well, is always like, once we get like clarity on the team's rotations, what their minutes look like for the given players, that's really when we can, really, really start to cook in NBA DFS once we have a little bit more clarity. Andrew's asking one more for you: Achua or Markkanen at power forward? The whole multi-positional this year is making things difficult. I agree. I think that's like I think that will be the multi-positional thing could be a differentiator where, especially if you hand build lineups, I think that you can really like tweak things in terms of where you slot players. Obviously, as I said before, I use an optimizer. So you have to go in and like set the limits of where you use certain players, or, a lot of optimizers have the option to select them as like only a power forward instead of a small forward. And that's how you could do it. If Achua gets confirmed, I would take him over Markkanen. Again, slightly better game environment for him. I think that's just going to be better than Cleveland and Memphis. Who are your double candidates tonight? That's a good one. I already bet on Julius Randle to have a double for the New York Knicks. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a double from obviously Embiid. I think that's a pretty easy one. Sabonis, I think, is another solid option. As we could see, let's just scroll down this list a little bit. Gobert getting to a double. I don't think anyone's going to be shocked if that were to happen. LaMelo Ball could be a sneaky option for a double if that game stays close as it's projected to. Just 1 point spread, solid over under. He could get there for points and assists. I wouldn't be surprised there. Of course, you could go Karl Anthony Towns. Jaren Jackson, I took the over on his points, rebounds, and assists combined, which was at, I want to say it was at 27.5 or 28. I took the over on that. Looking to have more exposure to him in the betting market tonight rather than DFS, just because, again, not super thrilled with that game environment. Just because it's an 11-game slate, I think that there are other options on the slate. It's Mr. Jackie Moon is also saying Vucevic for the Bulls. Absolutely. Karl Anthony Towns. Those are all pretty solid options. Yeah, absolutely. Like, we know the players that should be super consistent when it comes to posting doubles. DJ is asking, what would you do for Indiana and Charlotte? Looks like an even spread. Would Memphis be a good choice to upset Cleveland tonight, or does Cleveland still have too many scores? Memphis is a 7.5 point home favorite. They're 7-point home favorites. They are minus 290. So Memphis is the favorite in this game. I would just double check the lines that you're looking at to make sure, because Memphis is the favorite, obviously making the playoffs last year. via the play-in game, if I remember correctly. I know they lost to Utah in the first round, but the play-in game is pretty sure they were there in the play-in game. But Memphis is the favorite tonight, so I would be siding with them on the spread. If you can get it at 6.5, that'd obviously be great. What do you do for Indiana and Charlotte tonight in terms of betting or DFS? Like, if you are looking to take this in betting, I mean, obviously it's super close. I mean, I think ultimately Indiana is a slightly better team. I don't think it's by much. So I would just take Indiana straight up on the money line. That's where I would go. So Indiana straight up, like, we're dealing with essentially the same across the board, but I think Indiana's better slightly, not by much. I think they have a little bit more consistency. What we get from the Hornets, obviously their injury situation, if Rozier isn't in there, et cetera, et cetera. So Pacers are where I would go. Can you rank Mo Bamba, Wendell Carter, Derek Favors, and Evan Mobley? So I know Derek Favors, at least he's popping in our projections, which I understand why, just because of the blow-up potential. Like, there's, he's obviously going to see plenty of run kind of regardless of what happens, which I understand. For me, I would take of that. See if we have any more confirmed starting lineups. Maybe that will impact things. Mo Bamba, he should have plenty of touches. Mobley, I mean, these are all really, really close. So I would go Mobley, Bamba, Favors, Carter in that order. That's probably what I would do tonight. They're all like super, super close. Like, it's not like one is like dramatically higher than the other. I think they're all in roughly the same spot. It's not like one game environment is, substantially better than the rest. It's Mr. Jack Moon saying, I took some most improved player futures with Kuzma, Lonzo, Tyler Herro, just small bets on each. Yeah, that's good. Like, I love betting on some of those longer markets. I didn't do any at the jump of the season. I know I'll hop in once. Maybe we get like a month or two into the season just to see how things shake out a little bit. I think that the Tyler Herro one is a solid one. I know he had like, a weaker year last year than he did in his rookie year. But still his minutes are going to be there. Miami trusts him. He'll still be out there for plenty of minutes, so his opportunity should be perfectly fine. It's been a former Laker the last couple of years. I might have to do with D'Angelo Russell, Kuzma, Lonzo, just in case the trend continues. Hey, it might be. Maybe Kuzma has a time to shine now that he's with the Wizards and can really like step up and be like a true scorer for them, obviously playing a bit of a backup role the past few years. And then Lonzo, like I said this before, like Lonzo had a really solid year last year, especially from, downtown shooting. Like, he was improved last year. I think it, kind of went overlooked in some capacities. I know the Bulls are like a huge pick for a lot of people to make the playoffs this year. So that's like, I'm totally on board with that. And then Jaren Jackson. Yeah, I think that's also a solid option. Like, last year, just dealing with so many injuries, he comes back at the end of the season, doesn't look amazing, when they were in the playoffs, like all that. But, Jaren Jackson was awesome. Like, what was it, 2 years ago at this point? And just an option I think you could use in DFS, looking to his combined points and rebounds for a betting prop. If you're looking at that on a nightly basis, I think that's totally fine, especially, once we see like some of the matchups for them, like when the Grizzlies play, the Timberwolves or the Rockets, or they're playing the Kings or the Trailblazers, or all these teams that play like super fast and don't play defense. Jaren Jackson, like stepping up to be that secondary scorer behind Ja Morant, I think is something that is very, very realistic. He did just get paid. What was that, on Monday? He got paid. So like, they want him there. They're going to get him involved in the offense, like all those sorts of things. So the big news on tonight's slate, or at least one of the news points that we're waiting on, is Jaylen Brown for the Boston Celtics. I think that will only elevate Jason Tatum. I don't think like he needs any more like help, because he's obviously an amazing player to begin with. Him scoring 45 to 55 FanDuel points tonight is obviously a realistic possibility, even if Brown was in the lineup. But if he is in fact ruled out, because again, they said that he was starting, and then he said himself he's questionable because he's coming out of the COVID protocols. And there was a quote today about his conditioning because he said he had trouble breathing, whatever it might be. We want final confirmation whether he's in or out. I still know I'll have plenty of shares of Tatum regardless if he's in or out. Lillard and Joel Embiid are players that I'll be trusting again and again tonight. Big on Rashawn Holmes tonight as well. Especially if you're hand building lineups, I think this is really where you could get pretty creative in terms of rostering, multiple players that are quote unquote should be at one position, but you can kind of slot them in somewhere else. I think that is interesting. I think that's something you need to pay attention to, especially if you're using an optimizer, whatever settings they have in terms of selecting players at a given position. Some of them have drop downs where you can select to only use Rashawn Holmes at power forward. That's something you should really pay attention to just in terms of when you're building multiple lineups, because you want to have certain players in certain spots so you're not blocking. Like if you have Rashawn Holmes, obviously in center, you obviously can't play Embiid then. And if you want to have Embiid in X amount of lineups, you just got to make sure all those settings are set. That's something that everyone's going to have to deal with. 11 games on the slate. Again, really looking at Washington, Toronto, Houston, Minnesota, and Sacramento, Portland as the main 3 games I want a lot of exposure to. Again, I to recap it for the people that are interested in betting, I took Chicago, I took Washington, I took Boston, I took Philly, all 4 teams, all on the spread. Not a parlay, just all on the spread, all by themselves. No, Chicago, Toronto, Boston, Philly, if that's what I said. Those are the 4 teams. I took the over on Rashawn Holmes on his points, rebound, assist combined prop. That was sitting at 21.5. I took the over on that. Took Jaren Jackson, the over on his prop. I think it was at 27 or 28.5. I took Julius Randle to have a double-double tonight. Pretty good spread to start the season. Again, we have plenty of value. We need the confirmed lineups for all these teams. Obviously, we'll get those once 6:30. Hopefully not much later than that rolls around, and we should be in a good spot. Tyrese Maxey, value play for Philly is someone I'm high on tonight. Malik Beasley for Minnesota, I'm also pretty high on tonight. I think that this game is going to be awesome for fantasy scoring. I like Scotty Barnes from Toronto as a value tonight. I think you can certainly be looking there. It's Mr. Jackie Moon is saying Embiid double-double plus a 76ers win was about 138. I mean, yeah, that looks pretty good. I think obviously he can do a double, he can post a double-double on any given night. Obviously, I think we'd all agree that Philly, they're a better team than the Pelicans. That's not too bad. I personally don't love doing those combined things where you need to have both things happen, where it's not unrealistic to think that Embiid goes for 30 points and 9 rebounds and the 76ers still win. And then you're just obviously one short of losing it. Meanwhile, you handicapped it perfectly. You knew it was going to happen and he just doesn't get one extra rebound. Meanwhile, they won the game and he was that close. Which would I be more confident in? Embiid hitting a double-double or the 76ers winning out of those? The 76ers straight up are minus 178. Again, I think that's a little bit too much juice. As I already said, I already took Philly -4, so that's the spot I would go just to stay on that same path again. Philly just winning and covering. All right, so that does it for the NBA Q&A. Again, we have the Daily ISO, the podcast covering the day's slate 5 days a week over at numberfire.com. You can also find it on the FanDuel Podcast Network. You can follow me on Twitter at DFS_Tom. Until next time, good luck in your contests.